Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, again for the second day. We are pleased to welcome new participants, as well as those of you who've been able to attend our conference in past years, or just last week, the first day of this conference. If you wish you could have signed up for more than one breakout session, no worries. All of the presentations today are being recorded and will be on our conference website following the end of this live conference in early February. I am Jeannie Ferguson, and I'm happy to welcome you to this breakout presentation, Tribal Child Welfare Practices. On behalf of the Planning Committee for the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, I ask that you join me in acknowledging that the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus here on the shores of Wonkshik-Homikla or Lake Mendota resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they know as Dejop or Four Lakes. Because the reach of the university extends to the far corners of our state, we also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you're watching this from the land of one of these 12 First Nations, or if you're more distant, we encourage you to learn about the history of the people whose land you are occupying. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role our profession has played in the attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families, such as was the aim of boarding schools in this state and across this continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection on our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action in our work in communities once the conference is over. We hope this conference provides space for the critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear and tell truths, and move toward action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward today on that journey. And now I have a few details before we get started. We know many of you are curious about the CEUs that you registered for. You should be all set. To access this presentation, you were required to provide your name and email, and that allows us to verify your attendance. So you will get CEUs for this presentation, which will be distributed via email in the coming weeks. Your cameras and microphones will remain muted throughout the session, but you'll be able to pose questions to the presenters in the Q&A function on your screen, not the chat function. And now it's my pleasure to invite you to hear the wisdom our panel of presenters have gathered together to share with you. They will introduce themselves in the context of their identities as proud tribal members to speak about their work within their tribes. Presenters, welcome. Go ahead.
English, Jeannie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanya Cornelius. I'm the Tribal Affairs Specialist for the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. I am honored to be here today with this wonderful panel of 5 child welfare professionals and leaders in their communities and in their work. I'm going to start off with asking each panelist to please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do, who you represent, your background in the field of child welfare, and anything else you feel that you might want to share with our attendees today. I will maybe start with, I don't mean to pick on you, Nick, but you're the first, like I'm just going across my screen and you're the first one there. So if you want to jump us off and get us started and then popcorn it over to another panelist, we'd appreciate that. Miigwech.
Bonjour. My name is Nicholas Vanzile. I work for the Sikagan Chippewa Community Indian Child Welfare Department. I work with all the on-reservation families and with any families that are involved in child protection off-reservation that are enrolled tribal members. So background is I have a bachelor's degree in from UW-Stout in Human Development and Family Studies, and worked for quite a few years with the placement side of child welfare and group homes, and did some volunteering there and just kind of fell in love with it. One of my policy classes in school had gotten me involved in the Indian Child Welfare Act and doing some research there, and been pretty active and involved since I started the position in 2016. So welcome.
I was waiting for you to pick the next person.
How about
Reb-
Tibissum?
Okay.
I'm Tabitha Rice, and I am the current LCO Indian Child Welfare Director, also representing the Coudray, obviously. And I have been working in child welfare for a really long time. I think it was 2005 when I started as a parent aid caseworker. Took a 2-year break and did something else and came back, and I'm now doing this. And like Nick, we work with all on-reservation cases. We work any case across the United States where there is an Indian child that is involved. I supervise my staff. We do all kinds of stuff that's fun. We do a lot of family activities. We also have a family services side, so we're not just child protection. Just a lot of cool stuff going on at LCO lately. So that's what I do here. And how about Abby?
Bonjour, good afternoon. I was going to say good morning. I am Abby Dahl. I have worked in between public health and child protective services and adult protective services for about 15 years. I have a special passion in understanding state and federal legislation and specifically how it impacts diverse communities and sovereign nations. I love building community relationships and keeping counties and tribal nations interconnected with one another. I have served Forest County Potawatomi for about 12 years as their Family Service Division Administrator. My educational background is nearly a doctoral degree from Edgewood College in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm honored to be participating on this panel. And I will say, it's an honor and privilege to introduce Esie.
Okay. Bonjour, Esaban Indigenous Nakazi, Nimigizi Dode, Machkizibi and Dunjiba, Anishinaabe Kwenda, Nina Sway Medeo, Gaye, Niwi Gabe Mede. I just want to say that my name is Esie Leoso-Corbine. I am the former Social and Family Service Director for Battle River Tribe, and I'm retired and as of 5 minutes ago. And my experience in child welfare started back in the early 90s. I was a frontline worker for about 5 years, and I also started in parenting, the positive Indian parenting curriculum. And then I jumped into the fire and was doing child welfare work in child protection. And then the 20 years of my rest of my career, I've been an administrator both on a county and tribal level. And I've had a great opportunity in my career to meet a lot of established professionals in this field in Indian country and outside of Indian country. And I've seen a lot of changes happen over time. And that's all I'm going to say for now. Miigwech. And last but not least, Rebecca Benton.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Benton from the Red Cliff Tribe. I've worked for the tribe since 1995 in various positions, including a law enforcement officer. I've been the administrator for Human and Family Services now for about 5 years. So I directly supervise Indian child welfare. I was a trainer for about 15 years for the BIA, which included Indian child welfare, and I'm really happy to be here to share some of the services that we're doing in Indian country here in Red Cliff.
Thank you, everybody. I would just like to clarify a couple of things. Just want all attendees and participants to understand that the BIA refers to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I also would like to clarify maybe the difference between, I've heard some of you talk about on-reservation cases and off-reservation cases. Would anybody mind clarifying what the difference is?
Okay, well, any case that we have that comes through temporary physical custody that is within the boundaries of our land base is handled by our tribal court, and our tribal court has exclusive jurisdiction over the tribal members within those boundaries. Off reservation, the tribal court has a concurrent jurisdiction and allows us to participate in potentially transfer any off reservation cases. So those are cases that would start in a state court, such as a county level, and be petitioned at that. We could petition those with that concurrent jurisdiction into our tribal court to handle them in our own tribal court.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to make sure everybody understood what the group is talking about or what they're referring to when they say on reservation cases or off reservation cases. So we have a tremendous diverse experience level with us today in this panel, and I'm really looking forward to hearing this conversation. I'm going to kick us off with our first question, and whoever would like to answer this question or start us off, I'm hoping a few of you can answer. What does culture as prevention mean to you in your community, in the work that you've done, in your experiences? When you think of those terms, culture as prevention, what comes to mind?
I'd be happy to share for Potawatomi, but also for my own culture. It's important to understand that we have built historical systems have been built within our families and within our communities and within our sovereign nations to establish protection and prevention of a broken family. And so, an example, I think sometimes we miss opportunities to bring culture back. We may have children who are placed out of home, say through a county agency, and we, because we have that concurrent jurisdiction and we bring that family or that case back to the tribal nation, we have families who have been broken from their culture as well. When you understand how your culture operates, you also understand how you communicate with others, but also what your responsibilities are. Example, we seek wisdom from our elders and bringing our elders in to discuss things of that nature. We see our children as our next generation and the need to protect them. And when that's all built in a nice, positive way, you're able to prevent brokenness because everybody understands where their role is within their community.
I'm going to piggyback off what Abby said a little bit. I just want to point out that in our culture that, we call an auntie or an uncle or a grandma or a sister, somebody that could not be possibly blood related to us, but in the culture they are. So auntie could be possibly involved in the child welfare issue as far as a placement or something like that because of extended family, and that's what it means here in Indian country. So I want to make sure that I pointed that out, that family doesn't necessarily mean blood related or marriage related in Indian country.
That's a really good point, the expanded definition of family. Can you give us an example of how somebody would be related, although they don't have necessarily a blood connection or a blood relation?
We had foster kids growing up, and so I would consider them my sister or my brother or an aunt that's not blood related. So I think it's the family dynamic and your circle and how you put that together. So doesn't necessarily mean that it's a blood relative here in Indian country.
Mm-hmm.
I think clan systems also, you won't necessarily be a blood relative, but you are related in a different way. And I think other tribes, like I know my dad's tribe has a practice of adopting relatives. Like, for example, when a family might lose their mom, somebody significant, they will adopt somebody to be that person for them. It could be another child. It could be that they adopt somebody as their mother. And that will shape like your family connection for generations.
Hey, Buju. I just wanted, when I first looked at that question, I had to think about that question because for us at Bad River here in northern Wisconsin, and it's farther than Highway 8, or by Highway 2, US Highway 2. I had to think about that question, and because we did a redesign in Bad River at the Social and Family Services Department 12 years ago. We implemented a redesign, and that redesign was to reflect our culture. And it was a step, the first time in our tribal history that any department was going to actually apply our culture in our practice. And what I found in that process was that it was an actual journey for us of rediscovering our true identity, not just for our clients, but our staff had to as well. And when I'm talking about the staff, because they too were handicapped about the culture. You know, we are, in this day and age, our people still suffer oppression. They are oppressed about not knowing their culture. They're oppressed because they lost their language. They're oppressed because they're not feeling confident to talk about that or even how to implement that. And so it was a journey for everybody in our department. And we started to implement the 7 values with the staff. And how do we put that into practice? And once the staff started to feel confident about even talking about the culture or talking about the language, we even had language classes for the staff only in services, because that's where we had to start. In order for a department to implement it, we had to be confident enough to utilize it so that our clients could really gain from it. And so we did it. Not only that, now today, when I look back, the calendar of social family services has 4 seasonal pipe ceremony and feasts. Every year, 4 seasonal pipe ceremony and feasts. And they have a traditional healer that comes in. They contract with 2 days out of the month that will provide an opportunity for clients as well as community members to utilize. And so we're opening that door. Now we're opening that door to let them know it's okay. It's okay for you to utilize these other things. We have sweat lodges. Unfortunately, COVID prevented us from having any sweat lodges last year. We'll sponsor naming ceremonies for families, as we'll have a cultural case plan. They have a community member that's in child welfare has the opportunity to either pick a regular case plan or a cultural case plan. And I've been there for 12 years, and believe it or not, tribal members don't know what a cultural case plan is. They don't know how to use that.
Would you mind explaining what it is for the participants?
They have so they have an opportunity to explore their culture, to get help. Like their question, we have a comprehensive family assessment we implement, and in that family assessment is a component about culture. And we redeveloped that assessment tool, because it didn't reflect who we were as Native people, as Bad River Native people. And so I revamped that entire assessment to include things about that would trigger to the client when you ask the question. For example, does your kid get on the bus every morning? And then in the culture component, it asks, do you have an Indian name? Do your children have an Indian name? Do you know your clan? Do you want to know your clan? You know, who's the oldest elder in your family? You know, write down all your generations, how many generations you can go back. Because that's one of the key components of parenting, especially in Ijibwe country, is with mothers, is they need to be able to tell their children who they're related to. And so my mother was able to tell me 5 generations back of how we're related to everybody. And so we did a exercise in that 20 years ago, 25 years, 30 years ago, we did that exercise. We gave every parent in that class a sheet, and they asked them to put down how many generations you could go back. 30 years ago, every parent that participated in that class was able to go back 5 or more generations. We redid that exercise 5 years ago, and some people couldn't even go back 1. They didn't know their grandmother's maiden name. And so that indicated to me right there that we have really lost something. And so that's was put into the assessment tool. How many generations back can you go? And so in that assessment tool, it identifies that the client may lack in cultural knowledge, and would they like to explore that? If they would like to explore learning about it, then the culture case plan comes into play. And that plan will have, do you want to have an Indian name to your children? Do you want to seek an Indian name for your children? Do you want to go to a sweat lodge instead of, on top of going to AODA? Do you want to go to full moon ceremony? Do you want to go to fasting camp? Do you want your family to go to fasting camp? Do you want your daughters to go on a berry fast? Do you want your sons to go on a vision quest? So all those things we can help provide and assist if a family chooses that plan. But again, they don't know what that is, and they're really afraid. That's a part of that. The essence of oppression still continues in 2022.
So when you are thinking about culture as prevention, you're thinking about reconnecting families to understand what that cultural case plan could look like and could consist of. Is that accurate? And as you were talking,
but the other part to that, Tanya, is that the worker needs to know what that is.
Right. Yes, that's crucial.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, Esie, a question came in, and somebody's asking, would you mind explaining what a naming ceremony is? Or if anybody wants to explain what a naming ceremony is. It might be helpful for our participants to also point out this is very much very Ojibwe based panel here, or at least Anishinaabe, right? Most of us are Ojibwe, and we do have one Potawatomi member as well. So the information that the panel will be getting will be strongly Anishinaabe based. So the question came in on naming ceremonies, and the other, yeah, so we'll start with that. Can you explain what a naming ceremony is for our group?
Does anybody want to tackle that one? If not, I could take it.
Please, Esie.
So a naming ceremony is usually happens at birth. At least here at Bad River, they will have a parent will what they call is they would give tobacco, pass tobacco to a way so that their child can receive their Indian name, and that name is their spirit name. And so usually an elder or maybe an elder in the family that can give those names. Not everybody can give an Indian name. Not everyone has that gift to do that. And so that's what it's really in Indian country or in Ojibwe country. That is one of the main responsibility of a parent, is to get their child their Indian name. Seek that out. And so the ceremony usually begins with the parents deciding who will give that name, and then each parent picks, like in Western culture, it would be like godparents. We would pick. We were in Bad River here. I always pick 4, and my husband picked 4 godparents, or we call them we'e, and they would be the we'es to our children. And so they have like eight godparents, I suppose, and then plus the person that named them. And it's very important ceremony. It's, they say that that's one of the 2 most significant ceremonies a person will have in their lifetime. And so it's a big celebration as well. They'll have food, the sponsor a feast and a giveaway to those ones that accepted the tobacco, because it means that if they're their teachers as well. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, crap. I thought I was muted. I was not. Okay. I hope that answers the questions. And then does anybody else have anything they want to add to that or talk about what culture as prevention means to you?
I just briefly thought about it a little bit, and I was like thinking that culture was here with our tribes before a lot of harmful activities were. And like, you know, if we could start returning to some of those cultural practices and activities that were lost or kind of put aside because of other things, that can be preventive in itself. It instills some pride with us and gives us some structure that maybe we were lacking, you know, where we substituted those activities that we were supposed to be doing with things that we weren't supposed to do, like drinking and using drugs or just not parenting well. So I think that, to me, that's why we can use our culture as prevention.
I know we're talking about prevention. This is Abby. I know we're talking specifically about culture as prevention, but I think it also highlights an incredible need that when a case off reservation moves into state court and is being managed by a county caseworker, how important it is to bring in those qualified expert witnesses and or involve your local Anishinaabe nations so that they can assist with that process, because we have noticed over the, so now I've been in this role for about 15 years, and I've noticed how sometimes culture is fractured with the parents. And so a child is placed out of home and it's fractured with the parent. And so there's actually two fractures in that culture as prevention, or that culture. And so sometimes you really need to rely on your nations. And it's been our experience that even if, example, I'll use Nick as an example because we work in the same county, the child may not even know which culture that they're supposed to be a part of. And that's been because it's been fractured. And so really having good open communication with the tribes so that you can help an individual who may be Sakagan and Potawatomi at the same time, and rely on those resources that are available.
Abby, would you mind clarifying for the group what you're referring to when you refer to a qualified expert witness, and how that, and can you give an example of how that qualified expert witness could be helpful?
So I can remember participating in a state case years and years and years ago, and they did not bring in a qualified expert witness. And I was not identified as a qualified expert witness for the particular nation that we were, the child was of. And a qualified expert witness is more often than not a elder within the community, or somebody who really truthfully understands the traditions and the culture of the nation at hand. Inviting them into the courtroom to give public testimony, or to give testimony as to why, I think it was Rebecca who brought up the need to, that culture is also aunties and uncles who might not be blood related in any way or form. That qualified expert witness can give that testimony to that county worker who may have limited experience working with a Native child, and indicate, well, Jane Doe is actually an auntie. Yes, we understand that she is not direct kinship per se, but she is a traditional auntie, and this is why. And this is why we recognize that. So frequently it's been noticed, not necessarily in our community as much, but in I've noticed this throughout my career history, that sometimes we forget to just ask for that witness to come in, or ask for that uh, elder to come in and give that testimony they know the history, they know the culture, they know it all verbally, because that's how we're taught. And to bring that into the case early on, the earlier the better, the earlier the better. I hope that answered your question. If not, I can further define that.
We actually hired a cultural consultant to do a lot of the things that Esie was talking about, because a lot of our kids didn't have Indian names, or our families wanted to gain knowledge about the culture and language. And so that was the consultant's only job, is to work with families that wanted that option versus, the AODA and all of that type of thing. So that seemed to work with us. And we basically did it to maintain the mental, the physical, and the spiritual well-being of the family if they chose to go that route. And we had a lot of success in that. And we did some of the things that Esie did, but just much later, not at birth, and things like that, because our families were crying to be reconnected, and wanting that, and weren't quite sure how to get that, or where to go. So we've had some success with that, and that's that person's only duty is to do that with the families that are choosing that route. So that's been a positive thing here in Red Cliff.
Okay, well, our next question, I think we're already we've very naturally transitioned to, which is talk about following, following the concept of culture as prevention. How is your community or program utilize tribal culture, such as traditions or customs, to prevent involvement in the child welfare system? I think, for example, one of the things I heard you talk about, Abby, was using, I've heard a lot of you talk about using, looking at the cultural definition of family, using qualified expert witnesses to explain that definition to a courtroom, judges, workers, programs. So I think that is one example. Maybe if you could expand on that, or does anybody have any other examples they can talk about or explain on how you've relied on culture? I think, Esie, you had a lot of great things that you touched on. If you could expand on, if you want to expand on any of those, or if there's anything new. But how have you utilized culture? Can you give us some examples of how culture has been utilized as a prevention?
I think things that we've done at LCO is just to provide opportunities to participate in cultural activities, or making sure that, like, when we do other events, like we did in October, we did a color run for domestic violence awareness, and for the boarding school children, we started out with prayer, an opportunity for people to do that if they wanted to. We usually start all of our activities that way, just by having somebody pray for us in our language. Other things that we've done is kind of looking, not maybe necessarily right now, but how we might be able to implement some of that with our kids that we're already working with, thinking down the road that maybe this will help them prevent them coming back into the child welfare system as parents. So we do things like, for our kids that are placed out of home, provide books and music and items that they might need. Like, we provided some of our kids in RCCs with sage and shells and stuff that they can use to, like, help calm themselves down and teach them how to use those items. We also really do pay a lot of attention, again, to that extended family, how they can be a resource. Maybe mom's feeling overwhelmed, but does she have that extended family member who could maybe help provide respite to the family to keep them together? Something else that we did that was a lot of fun, and I really want to build up on it eventually sometimes, is to use traditional games to just help the family interact. Like, we have a bone game. It's really just a long needle on a long thread behind it, or a thong of leather, and there's bones strung on that, and a thimble, some beads, other things like that. But the whole thing is to play together, to kind of encourage that interaction. And it's something that our tribal school uses a lot when we were in elementary, but I don't really recall seeing it a whole lot as an adult. I don't have one in my home, but I would love to. But I've used my family's own game. Like we have a dice game that we play out of a bowl. And we've used that in CST meetings with our families, just to get and model the interaction and then bring that cultural piece. And when we talk about that particular family, when I talked about other things, I'm like, what do you remember about CST? They're like, it's been 10 years, but they're like, I remember we played that game.
The game, yeah.
They don't like say like, like, I don't remember what the whole point of that meeting was, but what they remember is that interaction, and that was a good feeling for them. So things like that would be really preventative that we want to continue building on here.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I guess some of the things that we've been able to do recently in trying to connect a lot of our kids and families with the culture is we've been trying to hold typically seasonal camps. We started out with a couple like a deep snow camp and a falling leaves camp. So a hunting camp and a winter kind of storytelling and winter spearing and just bead and craft making, that kind of stuff. It's typically like a full Friday, Saturday, Sunday event where we've invited families and tribal elders into this. We typically have it at a rec center, but it's just a weekend where we teach a lot of the traditional, I guess, ways of hunting, fishing, gathering, and really preparing for that next season. We've expanded from 2 camps to 4 now, where we have our spring spearing camp, our wild rice manoomin camp in the fall, in addition to our falling leaves and our deep snow camps. But it really does provide like one of the best weekends that our families look forward to, because they get to see not only their relatives that were on reservation, but a lot of them that we invite from off reservation, and then other tribes as well, and just having that sense of community, that place for that intergenerational learning to happen. We have elders that come from Lac du Flambeau and from Red Cliff and all over that come to teach not only our kids, but our parents as well, because a lot of the parents that we work with, they're just as disconnected from the culture as their kids. So the things that we aren't able to revive necessarily in our own community, we're able to turn to our relatives in Bad River, Red Cliff or LCO or anywhere, and just have that type of space to come together. I think that's one of the biggest things, is to remember that we're all there to learn together. And when these kids see that their relatives around them are doing the same things, that all of these people that are practicing these and living this way, it makes them, that's desirable for them. They like to see that positivity, and they look forward to those interactions every year.
For our community, we have incorporated youth mentors. And so these are individuals who are Potawatomi members who have been identified as maybe they're academically strong or living within healthy families who are culturally involved and engaged. And so our children who are placed out of home and or are in situations or circumstances where their families are struggling because maybe there's been some disconnect in some way or form. Our youth mentors are paired with children who maybe have some other issues going on, and they're able to communicate with one another because they're at the same peer level as far as age group, so they understand all of the current community lingo, but they're also able to grow together and feel connected within their community. And we really want to empower that because essentially these youth that we're nurturing now are going to be the adults within our community and should be teaching others. And so hopefully that full circle ends up taking place. Additionally, our youth participate in growing the community garden and sugar camps. So that will be upcoming pretty soon. Sugar camps will start. And one of our most favorite gardens that our youth grow is our medicine garden. The youth and the kids grow the medicine garden together underneath elder leadership and then harvest and deliver the medicine to our tribal elders in the community. And when they deliver it to our tribal elders in the community, they're often greeted with stories and opportunities for learning from our elders. It's a really nice way to incorporate the entirety of that. I think one unique area that we have done in the last 2 years, we started right before COVID and then COVID kind of monkeyed it up a little bit, is that we have partnered with some external partners outside of the community. So we have partnered with a camp, a couple of different camps, and we send our kids who are placed out of home to camp for a quarterly on a weekend, if they so choose. And at those camps, we have had, it just depends upon the season, we have had community members join as the group or the breakout sessions to share with our community members the need for like learning how to drum and storytelling and building a fire and why it's important to keep the fire and things like that. And it just kind of creates this community. The next part of that calculation is, if you will, is that we also have our youth partnering with non-tribal members, and so that they can share with non-tribal members the importance of why keeping our sovereign nation so strong is important. I think everybody on this call understands history and such, and so how can we reverse some of that history and start to teach that history? And sometimes it's best taught when you're standing side by side with a peer, as opposed to in a lecture room or in a classroom. Sometimes learning and understanding and such comes better that way. And all of that hopefully prevents out-of-home placement in the end.
There's a couple of things you talked about, Abby, that I'm wondering if you could give a little bit of explanation around. Can you explain what you're talking about when you talk about sugar camps? And then can you also explain what medicines are in the medicine garden? I don't know the background of our participants, and I don't want to assume that
Sure.
everybody knows what you're talking about.
So sugar camp means that that the maple trees will be running, and so there's a lot of storytelling, and we wake up a couple of stories during that time with our tribal elders. It's sometimes lost in communities, and fortunately we have some tribal elders who lead our kids into the collection of maple syrup all the way to the collection of the sap, all the way to the cooking of the sap into maple syrup. And we celebrate with music and sharing of the maple syrup, usually in about end of March, early April. And it's just a good time for the community to come together. It's important for tribes because it was a substance that we have used for many, many years as a part of our dietary part, just in simplicity form. But I think the larger part of that is the opportunity to bring the community together and have conversation and discussion and storytelling and sharing of wisdom and sharing of questions from youth to their older community members. So that's that. In our medicine garden, we have cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and sema. And all medicines are important for ceremonial and just daily cleansing. And we grow it in our medicine wheel. So we have it associated in that, and that would be a whole topic on its own. But it's really important for our youth to be connected to their community, to understand the medicines that we use every single day and the reasons for said medicines. And I would love to have a whole session on that because it's interconnected in all of our daily lives as well. And I think even from a non-tribal member perspective, you may see it interconnected into their daily lives as well. Different topic though, so I'll stay focused. We have our youth grow the medicine garden. And then there's a harvest period, and there are specific stories that go along with that. And it's all about educating. So it would be like attending a public school session, but doing it all in a very methodical way and reasons. And it's generations of stories that we are sharing and generations of lessons that we're sharing. It's been a blessing to our community. We've been doing this for about 5 years now, and it's been a blessing to our elders as well, because sometimes when you move into a different season of life, having access to certain medicines can be a little more difficult to obtain in the natural form. So I hope that answered your question, Tanya.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I just love how, the intergenerational connectedness that comes there, and, the history that's passed down in like everything that we do. I do want to clarify for our attendees though that when Abby is referring to a sema, she's actually talking about a traditional form of tobacco that is used as part of one of our medicines and for our prayers.
Bonjour. I wanted to also add, I'm thinking after listening to everybody, it sounds like we have a lot of similarities with the tribes, especially with the Ijibwe tribes. And we kind of are doing the same thing. There's one program that Bad River is doing, is actually a prevention program. It's an evidence-based practice program, and it's called Byzandari. I believe there's a study there. I don't know, the study might be completed now, that was being done by the University of Nebraska on the Byzandari curriculum, because the curriculum is over 20 years old. And it's been, since it was written, I believe Minnesota tribes, Leech Lake specifically, I know, is still implementing that project. And so they're doing a long-range study on it, University of Nebraska. And so we have that curriculum at Bad River, and we implemented that curriculum. I think it's also implemented in LCO, Lakota tribe. Sorry for the acronym. But Byzandari means in Ojibwe, you listen, it's like you listen, I listen. And it's implied that I'm listening at least. And that curriculum is, there is a requirement in that program, and the requirement is that the parent and the child have to be enrolled and participate. And so in that curriculum, it's about the 7 Anishinaabe or Ojibwe values. And each component of those values is a week. Well, they have a class once a week. They're doing it virtually now. And they go through each one of those values for the parents and the children together, and then they split them, just the parents where they have their conversation, and then they do an activity with the child with that. And so a lot of those activities are created by the workers that work with the youth, and some of them is geared towards seasonal things that, just like Abby talked about, for like the maple sugar camps and wild rice camps. They have language camps with it, and so it's about a 14-week class, and that has been going on now for 2 years, I believe, at Bad River. That's one of our prevention programs that we have, and it's very successful. Parents and children just love it. Matter of fact, a parent returned with her other child that just got into middle school. And so I know that the state wanted us to focus on 14-year-olds, but in Indian country, especially in Bad River, that's way too late for our kids. 14 years old, they're already doing drugs. And so prevention, we need to reach out right at 6th grade. So that's what, 11 years old. And so we've been able to reach out. We focused and emphasized on that age group, the middle school age group, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, in order to really impact for prevention. And because even the kids that participated in this group talked about seeing drugs at school already at middle school. And so they already know how to get them, and they know how to use them at middle school. So, you know, that's the difference. I think when they first applied this curriculum, it was high school, but 20, 30 years ago. But today that's not the story. We know now it's middle school is the age group, and maybe even younger. The other program like we do is, like I said earlier, is the pipe ceremony and feast. And I just quickly want to tell a story about this. When we, on the spring and in the fall, a pipe ceremony and feast, it's the only 2 feasts that they have where they do a mini powwow with the kids, because they were losing their traditional dances, like the fish dance, the swan dance. Those dances are all specific to Ijibwe. And they do the fish dance in the fall and in the spring, because there's the run in the fall and the fish run in the spring. And when we first did that 12 years ago, the first time we did it, 9 years ago, the first time we did it, the little kids didn't know how to do those dances. Much less some of the parents couldn't remember to do those dances. The grandparents knew the dances, but the parents couldn't remember them. And so, of course, we had elders there that were teaching the kids. And there's one dance in particular that was the feather dance, where the kids, it's a competitive dance where they compete and they go all the way down to the ground and they pick the feather up with their teeth. And the first year we did that, the kids didn't know how to do it. So us as elders had to demonstrate that. Needless to say, we had a hard time getting down to pick up that feather with our teeth. By the 3rd year that we did that dance, the kids were, as soon as they seen me walking out with the spool and the feather, they were running and lining up, and they understood that dance, and they could even tell the story of the dance. So and it became everybody was like, oh, it's the feather dance, and everybody really engaged and really participated, and it was a happy moment. And so and that was all generations at the gym, elder, grandparents, parents, cousins, aunties, clans, everybody was there. It started out with participation level with 75 people, and the 9th year that we did it, there was 200 people there in the gym.
Wow.
200 plus. Yeah, so it grew. Unfortunately, COVID put a damper to those gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
Miigwech.
Great story. I love it. I love how the participation just grew to be so well attended. We do have a question coming through that I think it's a really good question. I'd like to hear some of your responses to it. Somebody is acknowledging the the traumatic and harmfulness that comes from settler colonial child welfare process of removing and placing children, even when they're placed with families or in the community. And so their question is, are there practices or rituals or procedures that any of you use when a case comes to this outcome?
I want to clarify that question. Are we talking about, is there a practice that we use for healing when a child has been placed out and the family is reunified, or when they're placed out?
That's a good clarifying question. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to ask for that clarification, but I can read to you what was written for the question. Often the settler colonial, when placed out, thank you for responding. So the person who asked the question did reply to your clarification, and they're talking about when they're placed out of the home.
I wouldn't say that we've got rituals, but I would say maybe like procedures and practices that we have. Like procedurally, we do pretty standard things like making sure that visits happen between the parent and child in that most natural setting available, making sure that if they're siblings, we try to place them together. And if that's not possible, we also make sure that those siblings see each other, extended family that is supportive, that they have access to the child too. And then like, just to keep the connection with the culture, that's when, if they're placed out away from their family, we try to make sure that they have access to cultural practices that the family is already engaged in, or, you know, making sure that the kids are consulted and the family's consulted, like how much exposure to culture do they need, do they want? Like making sure that if it's in a non-native foster home, or non-native family member, making sure that we provide opportunities for them to have cultural pieces around like music and books, access to like the tribal websites if we have them, or things like the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, because they have a lot of cultural resources online. So we just try to make sure that those kids are not just away from families.
I think Redcliffe is best served by Redcliffe. So when the tribal families see our caseworkers versus the county caseworkers, the outcome is different when county's involved. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because of past history. And maybe it's because we have multi-generational families that have experienced foster care, either trauma or the like with some of our families. So tribes are best served by tribes because we understand the needs.
I'm gonna weigh in on that question as well. I think it wasn't too long ago, maybe early in the fall, that we had this type of question at a tribal council meeting. I was meeting with council on another issue, but this kind of question came up in the meeting. And one of the things, how I responded to that then is that we are in a system that is foreign to us. And it didn't work for us. And we know that now, that this system that we came into, or came on us, was applied to us, didn't work for us. It did more damage than good. And I said, unfortunately, when tribes organized their social service department, well, guess what model we had to use? We had to use a model that was foreign to us. I says, and it still doesn't work. And so that's why the redesign happened at Bad River. But the other part to that is that the best, and I liked Rebecca's response, because the best thing that I've seen over the years to reduce the trauma, and when you have to remove a child, is to place with family. To place with family, because once you go outside to the next tier, outside of the family circle, that child's stress level and impact is so great. It's like a veteran that went to war. That's what that child has taken on. When you remove them from outside their family unit, it is like a child that has been in combat. And that's the trauma that they carry. And that's a bundle that we don't want to see our children go through. And we really work hard at, in Indian country, I know that all the directors there here that I've worked with throughout the years, they really work hard at trying to maintain that placement within the family unit. And of course, family unit is a term that we see in Western culture, but in our definition was said earlier, extended family. And so that, and which also includes clan systems. And a lot of times those kids are familiar with their family, their clan family, their neighbors, you know, their kin. And so they're okay with that. But once you go outside of that, they are deeply affected by it and will carry it for years. And there is a ceremony that we provide here for them, like Tibissum said, a ritual, and that's called the cedar healing ceremony that we will have, we have quarterly and open it to the public. And those kids are invited to come to it. Miigwech.
Miigwech. I have heard of several communities also having, you know, a welcoming home ceremony for kids when they are able to return to their communities. And just to clarify, Esie, can you, when you talk about clan systems, can you explain what you mean by the clan systems, and how do we know what clans we belong to?
Miigwech. I will try and explain that. Well, in Ijibwe country, which is just Ojibwe specific, is our clan system. There's 7 primary clans. There's smaller clans off of each one of those, and we get our clan through our father. And so if somebody doesn't know their clan, we will go to elders of that family, and somebody basically knows their clan usually. And if we go to an elder in that family, they will tell us, you know, the clan of that family. And going back to part of the parenting, of traditional parenting practices of knowing your generations going back. And so that puts it to practice. And a lot of times you have to go to the elders because the parent doesn't know their clan.
Thank you, Miigwech. Also want to clarify for everyone listening in that not all tribes get their clans from their fathers. There are some matrilineal tribes that get their clan from their mothers. But a child is born into a clan system, which, yeah, can vary, which the amount of clans and the types of clans can vary from one tribe to the next. We do have another question, did get another question that came in about foster homes, wondering, do you utilize foster care, foster homes in your communities when you do have to remove children? And if so, how do you find foster homes, and what is the process for them to become foster homes? I expanded the question just a little bit, but that's the gist of what they were asking.
So Tanya, just to kind of reiterate, when you were talking about the differences in clans, I think one piece of information that often gets lost is that there are 572 tribes, and we all operate differently. We're not the same, but we are the same. We're not the same. We're part of the same great creators family, and we work together. But each one of our tribes serves a different and very critical responsibility to maintaining the interrelationships between the tribes, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of the above. And that loss of culture, I've appreciated listening to this conversation so far, because that impact of loss of culture is so important. Just like Esie said, lose a little piece of it and it can really create a very traumatic situation. And now we lose, the family loses sight of what their culture is. So moving into your question about foster homes, Yeah, at Potawatomi, we have a very kind of a comprehensive foster care and family placement licensure process for becoming a foster home. About 15 years ago, we went through some changes because we were calling it foster homes and we were very modeled after the state system. And while we're still modeled after the state system, we recognize that internally we were also calling ourselves foster home when really what we were doing, we're seeking family placements first, keeping our children home within their community and within their tribal nation, because our tribe is one family. So we start with placement within our families first, and we often seek a brother, a sister, auntie, an uncle, a grandparent to raise that child in that moment where their biological parent may be unavailable. We want to keep them home, and so we seek those traditional family members first. In an effort of ensuring safety, however, because sometimes that can be of concern, and ensuring that safety and we're not placing the child in a home where there might be other additional safety concerns and or substance use, we do have our family placements go through our foster care and family out-of-home placement licensure process. It's very similar to the state process, except it's a little more robust in that we have a cultural component as a part of that licensure, and it's a requirement if you're going to be a out-of-home placement home that you will keep the child placed in your home as culturally connected as possible, up and to helping that child become culturally connected. Because when there's a little piece of it lost, and I think everybody on this panel has experienced this before, when you see a child who's been removed from the tribe and maybe has lost a piece of their culture, sometimes that can be difficult to re-enter the culture too, because you just don't understand why we have certain prayers, why we participate in certain ceremonies, what is your clan, things like that, and what importance it does. I'm trying to make this so that I can say this in a way, but when that little piece is removed, that's another piece of trauma that's in the heart that needs to be addressed too. And sometimes when that's missing, the child will have other issues that when we resolve the piece of the culture that's missing in their heart and bring that back, sometimes those issues, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, resolve themselves. And they may not have even known it was missing. And so bringing them back to that. So we include that cultural piece as a part of our licensure process. Our foster homes and family placements must sign a document indicating that they are going to participate in that. And if they can't make it to a powwow or a ceremony or something of that nature, we will send a cultural advisor to the family. Example, we have a family who lives 3-4 hours away from the tribe. So sometimes it's a little difficult to get there. So we'll say, great, what's a good weekend or a good time for us to come visit you, so we can ensure that they're connected.
That's great. Tibissum, I know that LCO or Recruit-Ray, I know that you have a foster care worker. I wonder if you want to maybe expand a little bit about how LCO's foster care program works.
So like Abby was saying, we also really try to push in-home placement. Like we don't try to remove unless we absolutely have to. And even then we go with our relatives. But sometimes we cannot find a relative who's able or willing or, can meet those minimum background checks that we have to make to ensure safety. So we will have to use foster placements. LCO has our own foster care department, kind of, it's affiliated with us, but anyway, we have a worker who will do a home study. We use the same home study that the state is using, so we're doing the safe home study. And then once that process is completed, like we've got the home study written, it's approved by our tribal governing board, so it's not even myself that makes the final determination. It's our governing board whether or not to issue a license. So once that happens, we just kind of keep that same process going. Like they're renewed every 2 years. Background checks are done regularly. We're in the home a lot, but the thing that we also do is we try to make sure that that foster home has that cultural tie. Right now, LCO has got one foster home, and it's unique in that the foster parents are non-native and live on the reservation or within our boundaries. So we've got them licensed. But in order for them to be able to take care of our kids' needs, it's like we have to make sure that they're aware of how do you access those cultural activities. How do you know, like we have to connect our foster parents with things and the families. Like we just the other day, we got one of our girls for Indian name. Obviously the foster parents didn't know how to do that. So this little girl had asked for that herself, and she talked to her teacher, and the teacher communicated to us that this is what she's asking for. So together we worked on making sure that that happened for her. The foster parents really try to incorporate things that are cultural, like making sure that they make things like wild rice to feed our children, that they prepare venison, deer meat, whatever, fish, berries. They actually like make sure they go pick berries and do all those things with the kids that they should normally be doing anyway. If they've got questions, they're asking us. But we also make sure that we're actively recruiting tribal families to become foster parents too. So that's something that we're still working on here, is like we have it open where any tribal member is able to apply with us. We used to only license within our boundaries, but we're kind of expanding to within our service area. So that's Sawyer County. So we're also going to be licensing tribal members within the entire county, not just on the reservation now. So that's our process here.
Nice. So our next question, we'll continue down our list here. So our next question is for our panel is that given that our audience is made up of social workers and other professionals that might work with tribal children and families, what do you think is the most important thing for them to know about tribes and tribal families? For whether it's students that are about to enter the field, or whether it is social workers who have been in the field and are currently in the field, or a combination of both. What are some of the things or information that you think would be important for them to know as they go into the field and they begin to work with tribes and tribal families? And I don't know, Nick, if you have anything you want to.
Sorry,
So,
wrong
I was
button
like,
there.
oh, so now he goes off camera. Okay, I see how you are.
So the one thing is, I think asking that family that you're working with, like, who is that, and who do you consider your family? Who are those important people in your life? Because it might be that auntie that they're not necessarily biologically related to. It might be all these other people that we've mentioned before that might actually not be a part of that biological family, but that larger tribal extended family. So it kind of fits with everything we've been talking about, but that's honestly the truth.
I like that one. That's a good one. And I know like everything that has been just talked about today is all important things, right? For social workers to understand about tribes or tribal families. And I would even expand it a little bit. And if anybody wants to share not only what you think is important for social workers to know, but like Nick just did, like, what are some of, like, do you have any advice or recommendations that you would like to share with our group?
I have one that kind of is interrelated with county social workers related to tribal nations. And I know that sometimes the paperwork component, doing an ICWA notice, things like that, might seem cumbersome, maybe even a little annoying, but recognizing what that really means and what you are really truthfully perhaps helping that child save. You might be the last piece of their culture that they currently have on person in their heart that you're saving by filling out that ICWA notice. There have been times where I think each one of us have received a child by ICWA notice, and maybe their parents aren't even enrolled, but we know that they are a tribal member, and it allows us the opportunity to even bring back families and bring them home. It is one of the most rewarding experiences. An example, working for Potawatomi, when you bring an entire family home who maybe 2, maybe even 3 generations have been lost because of out of home placement or removal. And now we're bringing an entire family home. The additional part of that is that the second piece of that is that while it can be cumbersome to do the extra duty as assigned per se, is if you have questions. I have never met another family service worker, ICWA worker, tribal member of any tribe who has not been willing to help or answer your questions. I think it's more annoying on our part when we receive people who might assume that they know everything about our tribe, or they know everything about another tribe because maybe they worked with a different tribe in, say, the Southwest or something like that, and now they're in Wisconsin, they know everything about us. Recognizing that a more humble approach is helpful for us, but we also want to help because we want our communities around us to understand who we are as a people, and we want to empower you to be the teachers of that as well. And so asking those questions, I seriously have never met one of us who, you know, if we're just, and say it, you know, just saying, hey, I recognize, you know, I saw such and such. How is this interconnected? And much like today's call, you will get stories and you will get all kinds of information that will be helpful for your career build as well.
Rebecca, do you have anything that you want to share as well that you've seen that would be helpful up in Red Cliff or the Bayfield area?
I always think back to the kids we had to remove, or any kids that have to be removed out of a home that's not safe, could be a meth house, and they come with nothing. We try to stock a backpack or a bag somewhere we're placing the kids that's not a black garbage bag. For the older kids, it's humiliating to them. And we try to be as gentle as possible and make them feel as welcome as possible. So we always try to have some supplies on hand that if we have to remove a child, that they can have supplies to go to the next place with if we're removing them out of an unsafe environment. So be as gentle as possible and stock those bags or whatever you have. Could be a toiletry bag, so they have something to call their own when they get to the new place. It's important, and it's really good for their self-esteem that they can have a little something after being in a traumatic situation. So my thought is just be as gentle as possible with our kids, because they could be possibly our future leaders, and we don't want to repair any damage that we shouldn't have to repair.
Another good point. There are a couple of questions in the chat that are talking about how can workers assist people in reconnecting with their tribes if they've lost that connection.
Tanya, I wanted to weigh in on that question, that last question. Sure. About an idea, and I guess it's about best practice in social work. And taking this back from my experience being a county manager, a county program manager, and it was an urban county, huge child protection unit, 500 social workers. And in those units, about 100 of those social workers were intake and investigation units. They had to ask the question, no matter if what that child looked like or what that parent looked like, whether they looked white, black, Asian, Mexican, Indian, the first question that's in their list of asking was, do you believe you are you or could you be American Indian? And that automatically saves that worker in the long run of getting all the way through the system, and all of a sudden you find out this kid is Indian. Now we missed the whole Indian child welfare track because they never asked the question until at the end. And so that we implemented that in that county, and I think that should be across the board, everywhere. It should be asked the question right away: are you American Indian, or do you believe you're American Indian? So that it saves the county worker right away to start to do the search.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Esie. And in the state of Wisconsin, anyway, it is the policy across the board. So let's hope that it's being consistently applied. But it is a good point not to make an assumption on tribal status based on the way a person looks. And I have seen, people do that in the field. They have also acknowledged that they shouldn't be doing that. And so, once that was pointed out to them, they were like, oh, crap. But very good point. I think that is something that people can easily fall into a habit of doing.
What was that other question you had?
I was just going to repeat that. I was going to say, does anybody have a response to how can a worker help a family reconnect with their tribe?
I think the easiest, it sounds so simple, but I think once you know the nation of that child who's placed out of home, or that family that is struggling, once you know who their tribe is, connect them with the tribe. And in every tribal nation I have ever worked with the exception of some of the Northern Alaskan tribes, every one of them have a tribal elder, a tribal advisor, some sort of person, elders mostly, other mentors who want to be connected with those individuals. And if you reach out and then stay steady on the course, Wisconsin does an exceptional job. All of the tribal nations located in Wisconsin do an exceptional job of trying to keep kids connected. So I can't speak loudly to others, but if example, the child is a member of a tribe in the Southwest, say Navajo, or another tribe, stay strong and stay steady on the course to get that child connected with or that family connected with their tribe. And I think the second piece of that is that if you can't seem to get somewhere, somebody knows somebody in your local within the nations that are closest to you. Somebody knows somebody, and reach out to them, and they'll do their best to help you get connected.
Okay, I know we are almost at time. Esie, you had some kudos and a big chimigwech to you for clarifying not to assume somebody's tribal status based on their appearance. So one of our attendees, wanted to say thank you for calling that out. Also, I know that we are close to time, and wanted to just kind of wrap up with kind of tying our conversation back into the theme of the conference. This conference theme is, a radical hope in a racialized society, and wanted to pose a question to our panel about, do any of you have or want to share kind of what is your radical hope for your community? If there were no limitations at all.
I guess mine would be the elimination of AODA issues. probably 99% of our cases are AODA related. People are so into their use that they've, walked away from their children, and we're trying to, piece this family back together. And that would be my hope and my dream, is that there'd be no more methamphetamine or opiates or alcohol in our community anymore.
Just kind of echoing what Rebecca said. One theme that, or one comment that we have made as we've been, so our tribal nation has been working on strategic planning and kind of planning for the future over the last many years. And I always say, well, if every one of our families were healthy and back to the original clan systems, and we were all operating in a healthy manner, and we didn't have opioids, and we didn't have methamphetamines, and we didn't have an alcohol issue within our communities, you wouldn't need family services. You wouldn't need Indian child welfare, because everybody were working together. But our reality is that that's not the case. And so I think my radical hope for our communities is that all of our members are identified, especially children, are identified as soon as possible, and they are met with family, the family embrace and hug in our community. And I hope this doesn't sound offensive, but where we're able to take our kids back and then be supported by the county in a positive way. The reality is right now, I think having the most cohesive team, counties partnering and empowering one another to work together with their local tribal nations and other tribal nations is what's most important to us.
I like that. Does anybody else have anything they want to share in their last minute or two?
I think I want to say something, and and it's something that I thought about in my experience in working over all the years, is that we have been trained to look at our own people, even outside of when I worked in the county system, where our data was always coming from, the areas of color inside the urban area. We're looking at those areas specifically. And I noted once that in one district of that area, that there was 0 reports for 2 quarters. And my manager, or the person over me, asked me, why do you think there's we got any reports from that district 2 quarters in 1 year so far? And I told her, because white people don't abuse their kids. And she just looked at me, and I said, because we're not trained to look at them. So I guess if we're going to really address, injustice in social work, we need to look at everybody. We need to be trained to look at everybody, because we know that what I said was not true.
Good point. Good point. Anybody have any last words they want to say, or otherwise, if not, then we can pass it over to Jeannie. But just want to give our panel members one last chance. I've been trying to be really nice to all of you and not pick on you. But Nick, you've been so quiet today that I've had to do it at least once. So
I honestly, how do you restate everything that everyone's already said?
right.
Right. Rebecca, Abby, you guys said it immensely, like the substance abuse issues, and Esie, we are looked at a higher rate than any population. Unfortunately, I mean, I look at some statistics from our our county jail, and there are 2 tribes in Forest County, and in the past 5 years, that 15% of our population in Forest County is natives. 51% of the incarcerated population over the past 5 years, from December or from January of 2015 through December of 2020, 51% was Native Americans.
Wow.
It's a disproportional rate of
Mhm.
incarceration, out-of-home placements, and as Esie said, just ask the question.
Which that's a
Right.
good note to wrap up on. Again, thank you to all of our panelists for being with us today. I know I have enjoyed the conversation, and I just have a lot of respect for each and every one of you, and appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and opinions and your ideas. And with that, I will pass it over to Jeannie, who has some things to wrap us up with today.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I will end on that same note. Many thanks to each of our presenters for their stories, their time, their expertise, and all the valuable information that you've shared with us today. Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you also to everyone in attendance for being a part of this event and for your commitment and efforts to confront racial injustice of the sort Nick just described in your work and in your daily lives. Please fill out the evaluation for this session. We have an evaluation link in the Q&A that you can follow if you have time now, or if you want to watch for an email coming later today with a link to complete that evaluation. That would be great. Most of you who requested CEUs when registering, you will receive that in the mail as well. So finally, at 2 p.m. this afternoon, we'll have our closing session of the conference, a conversation between Oceana Sawyer and Ali Muldrow. We hope you can make that. And please see the link in the Q&A for that. And thank you again so much for your participation, and again to all of our panelists. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Ramapi.